I am actually from Columbus, so I was born, raised, and stayed in Columbus my whole life. I am actually a fourth-year history student, and I have a minor in medieval and Renaissance studies. So my dad was actually a history major at Ohio State in the early 90s, and my grandfather taught here, so I've just always been super interested in the history degree. We always grew up taking vacations to historical locations, so it was kind of just exactly what I wanted to do once I got here. I started out as poli-sci because I thought that that would give me kind of the best of both worlds because I was interested in government and history. So I came in with the intention of doing a history minor, but then decided that history was better as a major. I think it just benefited me more. I was more interested in the actual historical aspects than like the political side of anything. I interned this past summer at Princeton University with the Jefferson Papers. It was really wonderful. The Jefferson Papers actually has been working since the early 40s at Princeton University, and their job has been to transcribe and publish every single one of Jefferson's handwritten documents, whether it be correspondence or anything of the like. So my job was to work with his meteorological records and transcribe them in hopes of creating a digital online database and free resource to anyone who wants to have access to that data. So my main job was the transcription. So a typical day at Princeton would be coming in, getting everything set up on the computer, would look like going to the Massachusetts Historical Society or the Library of Congress and pulling up some digital resources that we have background for. That way we have some information about Jefferson that we can just kind of quickly get to if need be, if we have a question. We also would have his log books open so that we can double check locations and things of that nature. So his account books and making sure that he was in France per se or somewhere else. So we would have those all open and available to us before we would start transcribing, and then we would open up an Excel doc and go just dive right in to nothing but transcriptions and looking at an Excel doc all day, and a lot of verification would go into that with either the account books or kind of turning to the other intern and being like, do you see an S or an F or a 4 or a 9, just kind of things like that. Those were the main difficulties, was trying to decipher small little letters like that, but other than that, it was pretty easy to read his handwriting. So some of the challenges that we faced was what the Jefferson Papers normally does is verbatim transcriptions, and what became really difficult, we soon discovered with the meteorological records, was a verbatim transcription was going to be very difficult to accomplish because page by page or even line by line, the organization of the records were very different, and he did this from 1776 until his death. So it was very difficult. It was a span of over 50 years and about 18,000 different entries, perhaps more. We weren't exactly positive how much we were working with. Some of the meteorological records are definitely much more beneficial to current society than they would have been for Jefferson's contemporaries. He didn't have very many other people that were doing things of the like. I mean, Madison is kind of the outlier. He was Jefferson's friend and also took temperature readings and things of that nature, but they were the outliers. They definitely were doing something that had kind of been unheard of. Like France and England were doing things with their royal societies that were semi-similar, but the goal for them was more just this was a hobby. They enjoyed taking the records. Much didn't come of it from the time period, but I definitely think it's a valuable resource now. If we learn from the past and understand the climate of the past to move forward and understand how it was impactful on the people of the Little Ice Age per se, like Jefferson, then we can use them to understand climate change in a more current context and how we can work going forward to help ourselves. Jefferson's character is definitely one that I feel we get some background of all throughout our traditional schooling, but we don't actually know until we have a deeper dive like I got to see. He was very meticulous is the main thing that I truly understood from him. I mean, some days when he first started these readings in 1776, we would have 10 to 12 readings a day from the time of sunrise to the time he went to bed. And he was just very engrossed in it, and he was so curious. And I feel like that's something that's lacking in a lot of people nowadays, but he was so interested. He just wanted to learn as much as he could and absorb it all. And so I think that was the main thing that I got from his character. I mean, we always learn about him as a politician and things of that nature, but we learn very little about the scientific side of him or anything along those lines. And so I think it really pulls into the personal how deeply passionate he was about these things. And so I really enjoyed that. The tools that Jefferson used in order to accomplish the meteorological readings, there are multiple different ones. The main one would be the thermometer that he used. we did a deep dive to try to figure out kind of what he was using, and we came to the conclusion that he definitely was using Fahrenheit as his readings and everything. The main trouble that they came across was trying to figure out what temperature mercury froze at, which was something that we were also having trouble trying to figure out, since their thermometers were definitely different from ours nowadays. We also dealt with some hygrometers and hydrometers. My personal favorite deep dive research that I did was with the hygrometers, because there were so many different ones, and it's still such a struggle to try to figure out what the scale was, because there's no information on who made these scales or what exactly they mean, so they could range anywhere from 1 to 100, but every single reading that Jefferson took from, say, a Duluth hygrometer was in the 90s, and we don't necessarily know what that means because we don't know what the scale was. I was able to discern some stuff from like the French Royal Society and figure out certain hygrometers, but it's very difficult to try to discern those things. And one of the hygrometers actually is just a physical hair, and the way that they discerned like how humid it was in the air was by how curly the hair got during a day. So it was just very interesting to see these early instrumentation records, because you would never think of them being used today like that. So the outcome of the project, as stated, was supposed to be the online free database. They currently are discussing potentially putting it into print. However, with the Jefferson Papers, there's always the large volume editions that are released basically yearly, maybe biannually, depending on how much work has gone into it and how many things they've gotten done in one year. However, the discussion of the meteorological records became a bit much because there's so much. Like I said, there's about 18,000 readings. So putting that in one standard edition seems like too much of a focus on just that section. So the discussion was, if we do a print edition, it would be its own like standoff edition. It would be specifically the meteorological records of Thomas Jefferson. So they're still in discussion of that. They're working specifically with the American Philosophical Society to try to figure out if that would be beneficial, or maybe attempting to also transcribe Madison's records and try to do like a joint publication of those. But the big outcome is supposed to be the online database that climatologists or historical climatologists or even ecologists can have access to try and see some of the records. Actually, we were in discussion and collaborating with the American Philosophical Society from the beginning of this project, just because they have a very good digitization team there. And so the general editor of the Jefferson Papers was corresponding with him, trying to get a little bit more information, trying to see if they potentially already had a database set up that could assist us with what we were attempting to do, because nothing like this has truly ever been done before. I mean, from the scale of 18,000 readings for something that's very unorganized, very all over the place as far as what he did do, because every once in a while there's phenological readings and everything. So we were set up with APS from the get-go discussing things. And so when it came down to it, we decided to take a field trip for the day to Philadelphia. And we got there and we got to sit down with the director of the digital group and just kind of have an in-depth discussion of what we were hoping to get out of this project, as well as any projects that they were also hoping to start with meteorological records. Because, I mean, the APS's archive, I mean, I got to walk through it. It's insanely large. Like, think the size of Thompson Library, and that is their archives. That is what's left underground that has not been transcribed at this point. And so it's so much. And so he brought up some of the records that he was hoping could assist us, or at least that they could start working on meteorologically as well, in hopes of creating this larger project for climate history. And it was some of Madison's records, some ship logs, various things that were just kind of all over the place, all over the board. And my general editor, I mean, he had very little experience as far as climate history. He just knew about Jefferson. And so we started this discussion, and it was very interesting, because at one point they looked at me and the other intern, because we're the ones with the background in climate history, and they said, "So what is the most important?" And it's kind of this moment of, "Oh, you're asking me?" So we had to have this whole discussion about how records are so important in the understanding of how these people were impacted by the Little Ice Age specifically, and how it's beneficial to transcribe all of it. I mean, even if there's actual numbers, this whole idea of how they lived their day-to-day life during this major climatic change is super important to the understanding of what was going on. So that was basically our very in-depth discussion and meeting with the American Philosophical Society, was just trying to understand what exactly would be of value to publish, and then also how to get it across. And then as a little added bonus, while we were there, the digital team decided to take us through their archives, like I said, and we got to see Jefferson's original copy of the Declaration of Independence. So I got to hold that in my hand, so that was very cool. And then Benjamin Franklin actually founded the American Philosophical Society, so they have many of his regular works. In fact, their boardroom is just his office with all of his books. So they just get to sit in that daily. It's no big deal or anything, but we actually got to see a physical copy of Benjamin Franklin's personal copy of the Constitution with his handwritten annotations on the side. So that was just our little added bonus for a day trip to Philadelphia. My academic coursework at Ohio State very much prepared me for this internship at Princeton. I mean, I truly kind of lucked out with my GEs that I decided to take. I took a geography course that I didn't really think was going to help me overall, and besides being somewhat interested in it, but I actually gained this amazing, just basic knowledge of weather and climate and how it works, and so I got that foundation laid. And then I also took a geology course, which truly helped as well. I mean, it's kind of, they go hand in hand and back one another up with those things. So I laid this foundation, this basic foundation of what weather and climate was. And I also kind of just fell into this niche of like Elizabethan history. And so for my senior seminar course, when I heard that there was going to be a little Ice Age course with Professor Samuel White, I decided, you know, this is something I'd be very interested in because I have this background in weather and I also love Elizabethan England and Shakespeare and all of that. And I know this is the similar time period. So I decided I'm going to sign up for this. And I just kind of fell into this love of climate history that I didn't know that I had. And so my time at Ohio State with all of the coursework really led me to this internship. I don't think I would have discovered it had it not been for those classes. In Professor White's seminar course, he actually announced it to the class as an option for everyone, and I approached him after class and asked for more information and kind of sat down with him, and he helped me write my recommendation letter and everything as well. Well, I first went into this undergrad degree not really sure what I wanted to do with my history degree. I actually interned with a senator last summer, and then I did the Princeton internship this summer. And after doing the Princeton internship, I realized I really would like to pursue a master's degree in public history. I think without the Jefferson Papers, I wouldn't have realized that. And so I'm currently touring grad schools, trying to figure all of that out. And what that means for me is basically making history more accessible to everyday people. So whether it be an online database like I worked with the Jefferson Papers, or digitizing something, or creating waysides at museums, something along those lines. The accessibility is the issue, and I would like to work with that more. My largest piece of advice for anyone, for any internship, even outside of history, but just in general, is, I mean, don't be afraid to try. Always apply, even if you think you might not get it. I mean, I sat down with Professor White, and I was like, I mean, it's at Princeton, there's no way, like, it's not gonna happen. But I went home and I sat down with my friends actually, and I was like, you know, it's in New Jersey, it's so far away, should I even try? And they were like, absolutely. What do you mean? Yes, try. So my biggest piece of advice is always throw your hat in. You might not be expecting anything to come of it, but the worst they can tell you is no, and you have a support system that's going to be there for you if you have to, say, move from Ohio to New Jersey for a few months of the summer or something along those lines. I mean, you will always have the support of other people, so try it.